There was a discussion recently on a forum that I'm on about the hailstones that are talked about in Revelation 16. And so I decided to, as an experiment, do a little video and upload it to YouTube. It's talked about Revelation 16, verse 17, and it's the seventh angel pouring out the seventh bowl or vial. And I'm reading from the NIV. The seventh angel poured out his bowl into the air, and out of the temple came a loud voice from the throne, saying, "It is done." And there came flashes of lightning, and rumblings, and peals of thunder, and a severe earthquake. No earthquake like it has ever occurred since mankind has been on the earth, so tremendous was the quake. The great city split into three parts, and the cities of the nations collapsed. God remembered Babylon the Great, and gave her the cup, filled with the wine of the fury of his wrath. Every island fled away, and the mountains could not be found. From the sky, huge hailstones, each weighing about 100 pounds, fell on the people, and they cursed God on account of the plague of hail, because the plague was so terrible. Several points. First, it is meteorologically impossible for there to be 100-pound hail. And Revelation in the original in the Greek says a talent, which can vary depending on which talent is being used. Let's just say 100 pounds. It can't happen. Now, that of course does not mean that God can't specifically intervene and create supernatural hail. But I don't think that's what's going on. You know, I could create hail. I could hire an airplane and have a cargo door that opens up and dump ice cubes out the back. Giant, huge ice cubes. But I don't think that's what's going on here. The city that is being referenced here is probably Jerusalem. And it's also Jerusalem in 70 AD. Now, the way I look at the book of Revelation, it is a discussion of what happened to Jerusalem at 70 AD, and at the same time, it's a discussion of what is going to happen at the end time right before Christ returns. So my view is by looking at what happened in 70 AD, you can get a pretty good idea of what is going to happen right before the return of Christ. So, are these hailstones literal or are they metaphorical? And as usual with the book of Revelation, there's no reason to make a decision because they could very well be both. However, there are some clues here that lean towards the metaphorical interpretation. Verse 20, for example. Every island fled away, and the mountains could not be found. Well, you can find mountains, and islands didn't fly away. It is describing a time of great turmoil in the world, and in particular on the land around Jerusalem in 70 AD. So what happened in 70 AD that parallels this, that might be of interest for us? Well, Josephus, in War of the Jews, it's in Book 5, Chapter 6, Section 3, talks about this, and something that's very, very interesting that I'm going to assert. You know, you can't really say in something like this if it's a fulfillment or not, but it's interesting that Josephus' language and the way he does it and the similarities. And it begins in section 269. The engines that all the legions had prepared for them were admirably contrived, but still more extraordinary ones belonged to the 10th legion. Those that drew darts and those that threw stones were more forcible and larger than the rest, by which they not only repelled the excursion of the Jews, but drove away those that were on the walls also. Now the stones were cast were about a weight of a talent, and again, that's exactly what Revelation says these hailstones weighed, a talent, and were carried 2 furlongs and further. That's how far they could be thrown. The blow they gave was in no way sustained, not only by those that first stood in the way, but by those that were beyond them a great space. In other words, these stones that they cast chaos throughout the city of Jerusalem. Section 271. As for the Jews, they had first watched the coming of the stone, for it was of a white color, and could therefore not only be perceived by the great noise that it made, but also by the brightness. Accordingly, the watchmen sat on the tower and gave notice when the engine let go. And the stone came from it, and they cried out aloud in their own language, "The sun comes!" That's really strange. Why would they say the sun comes? And it's S-O-N. I don't know. One possible explanation is that it's satire on the claims of Jesus, because he was very prominent all through this period. And they could be making fun of his Olivet prophecy in Matthew 24, talking about his return. In this case, his metaphorical return in judgment upon the city of Jerusalem. But they cried aloud in their own language, "The sun comes." So those that were in its way stood off and threw themselves down on the ground, which means, and by thus guarding themselves, the stone fell down and did them no harm. Now the Romans noticed this was happening, and they started painting their stones black. And that ended this particular warning. But still, look at the parallels. White, a talent, and causing great destruction. And at the same time, one of the themes of the book of Revelation is those that are being punished condemn God and do not repent. And these people were announcing, "The sun comes, the sun cometh," in my particular translation of Josephus that I got online. So, in conclusion, these hailstones I don't think are actually hailstones. In 70 AD, I think they were ballista stones tossed by the Romans into the city, causing great havoc. Now, if this pattern repeats, something weighing 100 pounds might be used as a weapon in the end times. Possibly. But no, I don't think that we're going to see 100-pound hail, although there is a very interesting example in Joshua where God used hail to destroy the enemies of Israel. So it's not I would say it's not an impossible interpretation. It's just not one that makes a whole lot of sense to me. So that's the end of my experiment, and I'll post it up to YouTube, and we'll see how it works. For those of you that watch it, thanks. Oh, and if you want to see Anastasia, my little girl, dance, well, she'll be on my YouTube channel as well. Thanks.